Hello everyone, my name is Rochelle Innocent and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that focus on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. At Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, communities, and relationships. Our YouTube platform provides us with a space where we can have discussions on all topics that relate to families, communities, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More specifically, the ways that the institutions of mental health and education have played a role and play a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures in order for us to live up to our bold slogan: support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, that also translates as recreating and co-creating spaces, both socially and politically, in order for our children to thrive. For those of you who are particularly interested in this topic, please be sure to visit our website. We post blogs that relate to families, communities, and relationships every other Sunday, and we just released a new blog in relation to family this past Sunday, so I'll be sure to link that down below for you to peruse on over once you're done watching this video. Now, as is the standard convention, please do subscribe, hit that post notification bell so that you're aware of every time we post, and of course, if you like our conversations and you want to keep them going, like, comment, and share this video. Let's get into it. Welcome back to our channel, and this week we're covering mental wellness, and as you can see in the description, we're going to talk today about how we embrace our fatal flaws. And this is going to be a fun, light conversation. You're going to learn a little bit more about me, not too much though, moderation is key. But really the focus of this conversation is to create discussion around embracing all parts of ourselves. Too often we find ourselves in conversation trying to gloss over the parts of ourselves that are less than glamorous, but still fundamentally parts of who we are and our personality. And in embracing authenticity, I don't think that I could really bear that slogan if I didn't also embrace my fatal flaws. And I call them fatal flaws because, they don't help me all the time, but they're definitely parts of who I am, parts of my personality, and there are some benefits to them, at least the ones that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And the purpose of me sharing these fatal flaws is to recognize that a lot of the things that might be, seen as less than ideal, are not the most socially appropriate or even acceptable, have their benefits, they have their perks. So I do believe that there are different categories where we can put our fatal flaws, and I think most of our fatal flaws aren't that fatal at all. I think they can be embraced and they can be celebrated for the benefits that they do bring to us, while others maybe need to be put on a leash. Sometimes it's about moderation and about knowing time and place, and maybe some need to be completely done away with altogether. All to say, those things that society or that people or that even you yourself might consider as a fatal flaw, I think that it's about time that we level set with ourselves and start to see some of the benefits that those fatal flaws might bring to us. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to talk about 3 of my fatal flaws. I'm going to kind of put myself on blast here as a way to celebrate our flaws and embrace all parts of our identity, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I figured the best way for me to sort of model that for you is for me to share some of what I consider to be some of my fatal flaws, and those who know me well would most likely agree with me. But I'm also going to talk about why I've embraced these fatal flaws, and why I recognize that it's a work in progress. I also believe fundamentally that we are all works in progress. Even if I can dress up with my words some aspects of my personality that make me a little bit of a difficult personality at times, I would much rather be authentic and be truthful and give people real tools on how to engage and discuss with me when things are a little tense. So let's just jump right into the video, and I'm gonna sort of talk about my flaws within a model, so within a frame. So I'm gonna outline the flaw, I'm going to talk a little bit about how it translates, then I'm gonna talk about like the benefits and the costs, because I think when we decide where we put these fatal flaws, or what action plan that we have around developing them a little bit, or developing ourselves around these specific flaws, I think it's best to categorize them and then approach as is appropriate. Let's get into this. Clearly I'm a little bit nervous and I'm stalling, but I'm going to still be selective with the flaws that I share. Maybe if this video does well, we'll do a part 2. I'll do some of my so I think these fatal flaws are ones that, it makes sense for me to embrace them. But I could go deeper. I definitely have more than 3 fatal flaws, but these are the fatal flaws that I actually have fun with from time to time, and they don't bother me so much. First fatal flaw that I have embraced is I am pig-headed. Yes. And I like to differentiate between being pig-headed and stubborn, because stubborn is just like you're not moving, you're not bending no matter what, just out of principle, like you're just not going to change your mind. Whereas I'm someone, I take my time to sort of build my position on something and to establish a belief around a given thing or context, or whatever the case might be. So because I'm fairly slow to decide, once I've decided, unless you provide new information, compelling information that wasn't already part of like the thought process and the analysis around my reaching a specific decision point, I'm not going to change my mind. I like to differentiate again, because being pig-headed means like there's still room for conversation. Like I'm still open to hearing different arguments and different rebuttals, and I still process them. But likely I've already sort of had those arguments with myself, and I've decided that the benefits outweigh the costs and the risks. So the way that this comes up is sometimes we'll be in a debate, and if I start saying things like, I know my truth, I speak my truth, that's pretty much me not budging. I know this can be really frustrating, especially in personal situations when you're trying to get me to bend to, your way of thinking. But if I'm not sort of persuaded, I refuse to bend. And in professional settings, I definitely am paid to be on my best behavior. So I definitely am much more politically correct about the way that this translates. And I've learned to be diplomatic about my pig-headedness, but I'm definitely a pig-headed human being. But before we move on to judgment, let me just go through the benefits of being pig-headed, because there are benefits, there are things, there are good things that being pig-headed has brought to me in my life. I can easily be described as a very tenacious human being. Like when I have a goal, I am like all hands on deck, focused on achieving that goal, and I will achieve it. I really am very motivated by like once there's a decision in place and I know that like different actions need to be taken, like I am 100% very focused and it gets done. The second benefit that comes from being pig-headed is that I'm resolved. I'm someone like, I'm not indecisive, I'm not loosey-goosey by way of, being easily swayed by different opinions. I'm very resolved, and again, I do take my time to reach a decision point. Like I like to weigh all the different factors, and I'm always open to new information, but chances are I've considered pretty much everything before I reach a decision point. So unless you provide new compelling information, the chance of me being swayed once I've made a decision is slim to none. And I think that actually translates in a positive way in a lot of different environments, especially when you're working on a project and like a lot of the little factors change day in and day out, and you need to like keep your eye on the bigger picture, but also stay focused on like the specific tasks that are taking place and kind of go between the balcony and the sidewalk. You know, you kind of have to look big picture and then get into the details, and big picture and get into the details. And I find that my being very pig-headed allows me to be resolved in situations where some of the steps in between point A and point B create a little bit of volatility. Last benefit that comes with being pig-headed is it lends to my creativity. So because my pig-headedness creates a certain degree of tenacity in me, because it makes me resolved, it means that if, you know, trajectory A doesn't work, I'll go with trajectory B or trajectory C or trajectory D. And even if I've exhausted the first 4 trajectories, I'll think up another 4. And I'll be very creative in terms of my method of approach, my method of attack, because the focus is on getting to that end point. And this is when the decision involves a specific outcome, or if the decision involves a lifestyle change. A lot of that will translate in actuality just because of how my pig-headedness translates very holistically in the way that it sort of fuels my drive forward. So that's my first fatal flaw that I've embraced, and I've kind of walked you through the benefits of that fatal flaw. But I'm also aware of the costs. I'm aware of, you know, the costs that I incur as a result of being pig-headed. I know, I'm very well aware that it makes me a pain in the butt. I know that for those who would prefer that I am swayed from one position to another position, I'm not someone who agrees to be polite. That's not who I am as a human being. I'll kind of stand my ground, and I know that that can be something that is frustrating for other people to deal with, and I recognize that it's frustrating. And I see that this might be the time to apologize. I don't think it's appropriate to apologize for aspects of my being that benefit me in a lot of different ways, but I do acknowledge and I see that I create frustration at times when people are looking for me to change my mind. And again, as it relates to managing, I'm very good at managing and moderating my pig-headedness and the way that it shows up in different spaces. And I've mentioned before, I'm paid, like when I'm working in a professional setting, I consider the fact that I'm getting paid for my time as also being paid to be on my best behavior. So I am on my best behavior as it relates to the way that it translates in professional contexts. But in my personal life, you know, good luck. It will translate however it translates, but all in good fun, of course. All right, so let's move along. So the second fatal flaw that I have is that I'm a direct communicator. So I'm someone who's I'm a straight shooter. I'm not even gonna say a fairly straight shooter. I do not like to beat around the bush. I like to kind of just say what I mean what I say, and then let's move on. Like, let's get on to the next thing. And, you know, I don't want to beat around the bush. I don't want to tow around the truth. I'm that person, if there's an elephant in the room, I'll be like, hey, you know, like, let's address the elephant in the room and let's be done with it. And I'm very sort of, I don't have a whole lot of threshold for cat and mouse games. I don't like those. I've realized that being a direct communicator and a lot of the different work environments that I've been in, people don't like it. I mean, people prefer that they take, you know, that you give them the time and the space that they need to deal with the issue accordingly. I find it still a little bit mesmerizing that people prefer sometimes the discomfort of sort of meandering around the elephant in the room, because that outweighs the discomfort of having to speak their truth in a setting. Because I guess speaking their truth out loud and addressing the elephant in the room is revealing their cards in a certain way, and some people like to keep those close to their chest. I find that beating around the bush and trying to be indirect in the way that I communicate very exhausting. I find it to be tiring. I've learned that it's a skill though, because I do want to reflect the communication style of those that I interact with, but they are the most comfortable when I'm communicating with them, so I'll do that. But it does take a lot of mental and emotional energy out of me to shift and change the way that I prefer to communicate with those around me. And I'm also someone, I'm very solution focused, so I don't like that there's an issue and we're having to drag the issue out and it's lasting longer than, in my opinion, it should last, because, you know, everyone needs a little bit more time to feel comfortable sort of addressing it. And sometimes people just kind of are hoping and banking on the issue magically disappearing, and we all know that's not realistic. It's better to just address it. But you navigate as you can. It's interesting though to note, because I've always just come to terms with the fact that I'm a direct communicator, and sometimes that means that I communicate less so that people have the space and feel comfortable sort of addressing issues in their own time. So that was kind of how I addressed it. And then I moved to France, and I realized that being a direct communicator is culturally informed, and it's on a spectrum. And while I'm considered to be very direct here in Canada, I was the least direct person in France. And for the first time in my life, I was the one who constantly felt like I was being shocked by the things that were being said. I was stupefied by some of the things that were said. I've had moments where my mouth literally dropped to the floor, like my mouth dropped open by some of the words that I heard exchanged. And I think for the first time in my life, I had empathy for the people on the other side of the conversations that I would have in different workspaces as well as here in Canada, because I was like, wow, so this is what it feels like to be completely caught off guard and shocked by, a direct communicator, because I wasn't as direct as my French counterparts when I was living in France. It's funny because I'm someone who's a talker. I'm sure you realize that now, and I've never experienced as many stunned silences as I had experienced while I was living in France. So that's like a fun tidbit that I like to share. So anyway, I think moving to France and not being the most direct person in a conversation served to be a great lesson for me, because now I'm way more empathetic. I'm not managing my own impatience when I'm dealing with someone who's less of a direct communicator. I find that now that I have more empathy about different communication styles, I'm much more patient. I'm much more able and willing to soften the tone of my message or soften the corners of my message, and also like just giving the time required for the resolution to take place, and the time required between the two of us. Rather than it be like my timeline for resolution to take place, I'm happy to take the average of my timeline with the person that I'm sort of in discussion with. What are the benefits of being a direct communicator? Why I've embraced this fatal flaw? One is I think that being a direct communicator makes me very efficient. I'm clear, I'm concise, people know what it is I want, they know where I stand. And it helps things to move fluidly. And having worked in project management for a few years, you need that fluidity, you need that clarity for things to progress. And that's always been something I've been able to bank on based on my communication style. I guess the quasi-benefit of being a direct communicator is it packs a punch, and I didn't realize how much of a punch it really packs when people are sort of, until I was personally caught off guard by someone else's direct communication style. But it gets things going. It kind of puts a little fire under people's butts if you're looking for, things to get going and for the ball to get rolling. What are the costs? Like, the cost of being a direct communicator is being a direct communicator, I translate my communication style. It's direct, it's clear, it's assertive, it's firm, and it's confident. And sometimes it's even bold. But sometimes if people feel intimidated or if they feel rattled by my communication style, they might translate that as my being aggressive, which couldn't be more wrong. And I'm not aggressive in the way that I communicate. I don't feel aggression when I'm communicating to those around me. So if ever it is the case that you're speaking with a woman who happens to be assertive and who happens to be a direct communicator, check your bias. She's not being aggressive, she's just being assertive and sort of owning her communication style. But the one cost that I'm not comfortable with, and this is sort of the cost that makes me moderate and manage my communication style a little bit, is people feel uncomfortable. And I never want anyone to feel uncomfortable when they talk or when they engage with me. I want everyone to feel like, they can be who they are and communicate how it best suits them. And I don't want anyone to feel pressured to respond before they're ready to respond. And that's sort of an implicit thing. I think based on the way that I communicate, people feel as though they need to respond immediately, and maybe they don't have the answers immediately. And I get that. I think that before I was very much like, I own my emotional states and you own yours. But I realize that sometimes when you're a direct communicator, when you're very forthcoming, that people kind of feel pressured to react or to respond. And I never want to create that environment for the people that I work with, or, in whichever setting, whether it's personal or professional. So because of that, I am very measured, and I try to adapt my communication style based on the person sitting in front of me. So my third and the last fatal flaw that I'm going to discuss with you today is that I'm a smidgen, just a smidgen, territorial. And I'm not going to give any excuses. I'm also not going to give any reasons. It is what it is, and it is the way that I am. Now, all to say, there are some things that I'm happy to share. And in fact, you know, if I share my food with you, that is my way of bonding with you. I do not share my food with anybody. But sharing food for me is a very much a bonding ritual. And if I've shared my food with any of those of you who are watching, know that I truly value and appreciate you. It's a rarity. I think it's funny because sharing food should be a love language, because I think, especially like me, who's like fairly territorial, it means a whole lot for me to share my food. Anyways, like, that is neither here nor there. That's me digressing from the point of this conversation. You know, I like things that are mine to stay mine until I'm ready to let them go. I maintain my dignity now, but I'm not going to throw a fit or cry into my pillow anymore. As a child, this definitely was some of how I responded to my things being taken from me or me having to share my things. And also for the years that I was in school during my formative years, I think, and I'm laughing, it's not funny, I shouldn't laugh. But the one prevalent sort of commentary on my report card year after year is that, you know, Rochelle's not the best sharer. And I don't know why this is. I really can't give you a reason. I feel like this has always been sort of my orientation. I've always kind of been someone who claimed things. I like to kind of claim things as my own, and then it takes a little bit of time for me to warm up to the idea of sharing those things. So what are the benefits of being territorial? I take pride in the things that I build and the things that, you know, I own. Like, there's a lot of pride and ownership that translates out of being territorial. Like, I don't just want it for myself. I want to take very good care of it. I want to groom it and make sure that it is in the best state at all times. Also, a benefit when it is the fact that I am sharing, it's a true gesture. So it's not something that I do because it's socially acceptable. I do it because it's from my heart. I'm not someone who ever feels obligated to share. Like, as those report cards read, I'm not a very good sharer unless it's genuine sharing. So I think for some people, you know, who are kind of impartial, whether they're not very territorial whatsoever, whether they share something, you don't know what it means. But for me, if I share something with you, know that it means a whole heck of a lot. Also selective, so it's not everything and anything that I'm territorial about, and I do purge, so please do not put me in hoarder's alert. I'm someone who is very good at purging every now and again, and when I'm ready to let things go, I do let things go. And I do, you know, a fairly cyclical purge on a yearly basis, so do not put me on a hoarder's watch list, please. Absolutely not necessary. I don't know, like, I think being territorial, like, the things that I create or the things that I own have, you know, they stand to bring me a lot of joy and contentment, you know, especially if they have high utility or they're artistic and creative things. So what are the costs of having this as a fatal flaw? One, if something's misplaced, like, I must find it. And I'm very particular about where I place my things. So if something is not in the right place, like, I know immediately, and it irks me. And I think that this is something that it's an aspect of my territorialness that I've been managing and that I'm working on, because, like, I will be like, oh, you know, like, this thing is missing, and, like, go crazy trying to find it and putting it in the right place. Another cause is some people might consider my territorialness as being selfish, and I disagree. I don't think being territorial is the same as being selfish, but it is what it is. Like, if that's how you see it, then that's how you see it. And I'm working on it. I think this is the one that I've had to manage it quite a bit. I think being territorial as a child, it definitely didn't translate in the most positive ways, and depending on the context of the scenario. So as an adult, I'm definitely still managing it, but you might still get an emotional response out of me if you take something from me before I'm ready to let it go. So Those are 3 of my fatal flaws that I've embraced. I hope that you can do this exercise with yourself and learn to love and accept some of the fatal flaws that you have. And definitely like frame the fatal flaw of your own, embrace it, like recognize the benefits and the costs of having that flaw. And if some of the costs are too high, then work on managing those costs downwards. I mean, why not? But now, of course, we're gonna get into the fun part of this video. As you can see, I am on my mat, so we're gonna do a couple of stretches. I wanna do some hip stretches. And I've incorporated some yoga flow movements between them, but this is really just a focus on deepening our hips. Hello everyone, welcome back. So let's get into our stretches. So just a quick disclaimer, I am not a certified yoga instructor, but I've done yoga for the last 10, not even 10, like almost 13, 14 years. And while this isn't a yoga practice, we're really just gonna be focusing on some deep stretches. I'm gonna incorporate some flows in between. So let's get started. We're gonna start in a cat and cow pose. I think we should start by warming up the spine. So all we need to do is inhale, you arch your back and look up. And then exhale, bring the air forward and arch your back. Inhale up. Exhale. I'm gonna do that 2 more times. And last one. Awesome. So now what we're gonna do is tuck our toes in from the back and push up into our first downward facing dog. That's good. So that's stretching your hamstrings. Feel free to walk it out if that feels good to you. And so what we're gonna do from this downward dog is we're going to inhale ourselves forward and then go into Shavasana. So we're gonna plank and move up into our upward facing dog. And then push back into our downward facing dog. We're gonna create a wave. Just gonna forward into plank, push back into downward facing dog. Forward into plank, push back. And do that 2 more times. Back, forward into plank, push back. Awesome. And so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get settled into our downward facing dog. And we're gonna do a pigeon pose. So to get into this pigeon pose, the first thing we're gonna do is lift the right leg up, pivot your hip. So let me open up the hip here. And then with your bent knee, I want you to bring your right knee up to your right elbow. Drop it down. And then we're gonna settle back. Now you can stay here or you can go all the way to the floor. And we're going to settle into our pigeon pose. So we're gonna hold this pose for about 30 seconds. And just settle in. What you want to do is you want to feel that stretch in your glute muscle. It's a great hip opening workout. So make sure you take a couple deep breaths. And make sure your back foot is in the center of your mat as well, just to make sure that your hips are aligned. A couple more deep breaths. Okay, so we're gonna walk ourselves back up, tuck in our back foot, bring this foot back up into 3-legged dog, bring it down into our downward facing dog. Chaturanga. Upward facing dog. Downward facing dog. Now we're gonna go with the other side. So with your left leg, you're gonna lift it all the way up. You're gonna pivot your hip, bend your knee. You're gonna try to get that knee to touch your bum. And then what you're gonna do is bring that left knee to your left elbow. Bring your foot across. And then you can either stay up here and feel that stretch, or bring your body downwards. And we're gonna hold this here, opening up your left hip. And again, make sure your back foot is in the center of your mat, just to make sure that your hips are centered. And breathe in. Opening up that left glute muscle there. All right, you're gonna walk your upper body back up, like so. Tuck your foot in the back. And you're gonna push yourself up into three-legged dog. Back down to your downward facing dog. And then fast. Upward facing dog. Downward facing dog. So from here, I'm gonna look forward, jump or step to the front of the mat. And then we're just gonna pivot our feet forward so that we're in the center of our mat. And then we're gonna roll up slowly. So we're gonna roll up here, slowly. Roll up. Right now I'm probably cut in half, but we're gonna squat down into the praying goddess. So feet should be positioned outwards, and you're gonna squat down as low as you can go. You're gonna hold this for a few breaths. If you can get lower, get lower. I know it hurts, keep going. Two more breaths. All right. So you're gonna go back down, bring your feet back into your forward bend. And then from here, let's sit in the center of our mats together. And what we're gonna do is stack our legs however is most comfortable for you. And then we're gonna put our hands back and we're gonna arch our hips upwards. So we're gonna go forward, arch, and then we're gonna sit and come forward. Come back. And then come forward. You're gonna do that 2 more times. Go as high as you can go. Forward. And then you're gonna come back. And this time, we're gonna hold the forward for a few breaths. So just come forward. and make sure both of your sit bones are grounded on the mat. Awesome. Roll your hips up. Now we're gonna do our butterfly pose. So we're gonna put our feet together here. You're gonna sit up straight, butterfly pose. And then you're gonna bend forward with a straight back as far as you can go and hold. Just a couple more breaths. Awesome. Amazing. All right, so the clothes off, we're just gonna kick our feet out as far as they can go. Do a stretch to the left. A stretch to the right. And then what you're gonna do is bring your elbows to the ground, or even outreach your arms and fold. We're gonna hold this posture. And you're gonna really focus on your breath, and with every exhale, you're gonna try to go deeper. Few more breaths. Make sure you point your toes up. Make sure you point your toes up. Awesome. Now slowly work your way back up. Bring your legs together. Do a little windshield wipe. Loosen out any tension in your hips. And we're done. Awesome. So this was our first video on mental wellness. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that now you're ready to embrace your fatal flaws. And I also hope that you enjoyed the stretching part of our video. I really do love these videos, and today I actually created my own little routine of different stretches that I love to do, and I put them together. So I'm super excited to share them with you. If you enjoyed it, if it helped loosen up your hips, please do let me know. Hit me up in the comments, or be sure to leave an email. And this video has been fun. So thank you again so much for tuning in. I hope that you had fun and enjoyed some of the disclosure that I provided, and I definitely hope you don't use it against me. All that to say, see you on Thursday, and I hope that you have an amazing week ahead of you. See you next time.
Like no one's listening. Some days I just feel like the world's into me.